In 1958, Howard Hawks walked onto a film set for the first time in 4 years. He was 62 years old. His last movie had bombed so badly he'd fled to Europe and genuinely wondered if his career was over. This was supposed to be his comeback, a Western with John Wayne, and on the very first day of shooting, Hawks went behind a set and threw up. Then he wiped his mouth, walked out in front of the cameras, and started directing what would become one of the most influential Westerns ever made. But Hawks didn't make this movie because he had some grand artistic vision. He made it because he hated another Western, an Oscar winner that everyone else loved, and he wanted to prove it wrong. This is the story of a petty grudge, a nervous breakdown on day one, and how all of that somehow produced the only John Wayne film that Quentin Tarantino calls a masterpiece. In 1952, a Western called High Noon became a sensation. You've probably heard of it. Gary Cooper plays a sheriff who finds out that a group of outlaws is coming to town to kill him. He has a few hours before they arrive, so he goes around asking the townspeople for help, and every single one of them turns him down. His deputy quits, his friends make excuses. In the end, his wife, who's a Quaker pacifist and doesn't even believe in violence, has to pick up a gun and save his life because no one else will. Critics called it a masterpiece. It won 4 Academy Awards, including Best Actor for Cooper. People read it as a Cold War allegory about standing alone when nobody else has the courage. Howard Hawks watched it and thought it was one of the worst things he'd ever seen. He put it bluntly, "I didn't think a good sheriff was going to go running around town like a chicken with his head off asking for help, and finally his Quaker wife had to save him. That isn't my idea of a good Western sheriff." So Hawks decided to make his own version, a Western where the sheriff doesn't beg, where the people around him are competent and capable, where nobody falls apart under pressure, a direct response to everything he thought High Noon got wrong. The studios weren't interested. Another Western? In 1958? Who cares? Then Hawks mentioned he wanted John Wayne for the lead. Suddenly, everyone cared. For the supporting cast, Hawks made some unconventional choices. Dean Martin, the singer, the Rat Pack guy, as a deputy struggling with alcoholism. For the cranky old man who can barely walk but can still outshoot anyone in town, Hawks brought in Walter Brennan. Angie Dickinson came on to play a gambler passing through who gets caught up in the situation and ends up going toe-to-toe with Wayne in every conversation they have. The trickiest part was casting the young gunslinger. Hawks wanted someone who would appeal to teenagers, and his first choice was Elvis Presley. Apparently Elvis was genuinely interested, but his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, made demands that killed the deal. He wanted more money than anyone else and top billing over John Wayne. Hawks wasn't going to give Elvis higher billing than the star of the picture, so that fell apart. A couple months later, Elvis got drafted into the Army anyway, and the role went to Ricky Nelson, a teen idol singer who'd never really acted before. Against all odds, he turned out to be pretty good. During those 4 years Hawks spent in exile, convinced his career might be over, he'd been paying attention to what was happening on American television. Western shows had gotten huge. Things like Gunsmoke and Wagon Train were dominating the ratings, and Hawks started thinking about why people kept coming back to them week after week. It wasn't because the plots were surprising. The plots were basically the same every episode. People tuned in because they enjoyed the company. They liked the characters enough that they wanted to spend more time with them, even if nothing particularly new was going to happen. Hawks realized he could build a whole movie around that principle. Forget about racing toward a climax. Forget about keeping the audience on the edge of their seats every second. Make a Western where people actually get to settle in and enjoy being around the characters. Let scenes run long. Let people talk. Build tension slowly in the background while the foreground is just a bunch of interesting people dealing with a bad situation together. The actual plot he came up with was almost intentionally simple. Wayne plays a sheriff who arrests a guy for murder. The problem is, the murderer's brother happens to be a wealthy rancher with a small army of hired guns at his disposal. Instead of attacking directly, the rancher just surrounds the town, cuts off any possibility of outside help, and waits. The whole movie is just Wayne and his ragtag crew holding the line. But Hawks stretches that premise across 2 hours and 20 minutes, way longer than most westerns at the time. And it works, because you're not watching to see how the plot resolves. You're watching because you like being around these people. The movie came out in 1959. It was called Rio Bravo. It didn't win any awards. High Noon, the film Hawks made this to spite, had taken home 4 Oscars. Rio Bravo wasn't even nominated. But it made money, and Hawks had proven he still had it. Wayne had found the lane he'd ride for the rest of his career, and critics, even the ones who preferred High Noon, had to admit Hawks had made something special. More importantly, people kept watching it. Roger Ebert wrote about it years later. To watch Rio Bravo is to see a master craftsman at work. The film is seamless. There is not a shot that is wrong. It is uncommonly absorbing, and the 141-minute running time flows past like running water. Hawks liked the formula so much he basically remade Rio Bravo twice more over the next decade. Same basic structure, same vibe, professionals under siege handling their business. John Carpenter called Rio Bravo one of his favorite films and turned it into Assault on Precinct 13. But the person who took the most from Rio Bravo was a kid who saw it for the first time when he was 5 years old. Quentin Tarantino has said he got a headache trying to count how many times he's seen Rio Bravo. He watched it as a little kid with his great-grandmother. Then he discovered it again on his own years later when he started studying Howard Hawks. It became, in his words, his favorite Western of all time. Number 1, above the good, the bad, and the ugly, above everything. In 2007, Tarantino introduced a screening of Rio Bravo at Cannes Film Festival and tried to explain why this movie, out of everything John Wayne ever made, is the one he keeps coming back to. He said it's not just one of the greatest Westerns, it's one of the great hangout movies. Here's how he put it. There are certain movies when you hang out with the characters so much that they actually become your friends. It's a really rare quality to have in a film. Rio Bravo is one of the greatest hangout movies of all time. When it's over, they're your friends. And what's good about seeing it again and again is that now they're already your friends. Whenever you're watching it, you're just hanging out. That concept, the hangout movie, explains almost everything about how Tarantino makes films. Think about the diner scene in Reservoir Dogs, or all those long car conversations in Pulp Fiction, or basically the entire first half of The Hateful Eight. These are scenes built around the pleasure of spending time with characters, letting them talk, letting tension build naturally without rushing toward the next plot beat. Tarantino didn't invent that. He learned it from a movie made by a 62-year-old director who was so nervous on day one that he puked behind a set.